Thank you all so much for coming tonight to hear Meg Medina. And I want to be sure that you all know that this event is paid for by our friends at the library who pay for all the wonderful things that go on around here, many of them. So feel free to join the friends and to buy lots of books when we have our book sales, because that's where a lot of the money comes from. So Meg Medina is an award-winning Latino author of picture books, middle grade and young adult fiction, whose work examines how cultures intersect through the eyes of young people. Her young adult novel Yaqui Delgado Wants to Kick Your Ass was described by Kirkus as a nuanced, heart-wrenching, and ultimately empowering story about bullying. It earned the 2014 Pura Belpré Medal, the 2013 CYBILS Fiction Award, and the International Latino Book Award 2014, among numerous other distinctions. It's currently a finalist in the Virginia Reader's Choice High School Reading List, so if you're a high school student and your school participates, vote for Yaqui. Meg is also the 2012 Ezra Keats New Writers Medal winner for her picture book, Tia Isa Wants a Car. Her other books are The Girl Who Could Silence the Wind, a 2012 Bank Street Best Book and CBI recommended book in the UK, and Milagros, Girl from Away. In March 2014, Meg was recognized as one of the CNN 10 Visionary Women in America. When she's not writing, Meg works on community projects that support girls, Latino youth, and/or diversity in children's literature. She's one of the founding members of We Need Diverse Books, so we're very happy.
And so what I thought I'd do tonight, I've been at 2 schools today, so I'm going to talk a little bit. Some of the slides and things were things I talked about at school, but since we have some adults in the room also, we're going to just talk about how authors, or how I specifically, sort of use the literature that I write and books to make my community sort of stronger, and what's going on with me and books and bullying, etc. So these are the books that I've written so far, as Lisa told you. And you can notice, of course, that they all feature Latina characters. From Milagros came out from Henry Holt, but that's out of print now. You can get it as an ebook. Tia Isa Wants a Car, The Girl Who Could Silence the Wind, and of course the infamously named Yaqui Delgado Wants to Kick Your Ass. And so the question, I write for all age groups. I really like to do that. I don't necessarily feel more comfortable in one or the other. Some days I really feel 6, and then I really just want to write a joyous, innocent, funny picture book or soulful picture book. Some days I feel 12, happy, open, wanting to race. Some days I feel really grouchy, like a 15, 16, 17-year-old. I have issues, and then I write YA. And I really like to write the whole range of people. But always Latinos. So people will ask me, oh, the other way, right? Why that is. One reason really distills down to Sandra Cisneros, who is the author of The House on Mango Street, right? So I was a good reader as a kid. I read Charlotte Webb, I read The Witch of Blackbird Pond, I read the entire Nancy Drew series, I read all that stuff, My Side of the Mountain. I still remember the covers of these books. I love to read. But it wasn't until I was in college that I saw Latino as the main character in a book. I was in my 20s. And I remember when I opened it and I looked down, I saw them, there they were, las tias and my tios and rice and beans and everybody in your business and all this stuff that was completely familiar. And I went, Madre mia, there they are, my people. And I know it sounds crazy, but it was a revelation. And I felt so valued, like that the experience of my family, how my family talked, the things that happened, like that there it was in somebody else's book. The other thing that was amazing about Sandra is that she also wrote Woman Hollering Creek and Other Stories, which is a great title, and it's just a direct translation from a myth, a legend, La Gritona, which is woman hollering, right? And La Gritona is a legend. She's dead, she's a ghost, she drowned her children, not a very nice lady, and she walks around haunting people. Ay, mis niños, mis hijos, you know, that kind of thing. So it's kind of deliciously scary legend. So she wrote this book, Woman Hollering Creek, and it's a collection of essays and short stories, I should say. And one of them is 11, and in it she says, I'm 11, but when I'm 11, I'm also 10 and 9 and 8 and 7 and all the ages I've ever been. And that's really true for all of us. And it's certainly true for people who write works for children. Somehow, we can still be 16, believably. We still feel it. When we're 12, we can be that, we can be 7. I don't know really why that is, but that's really the case. That when I'm writing a work for the child of a certain age, I can get completely immersed in that, and I just return to what it felt like to be that age. So Sandra sort of is a good symbol for why I write for all ages, and why I feel like it's important to write Latino stories. It's especially important now. But there is a danger to it, right? Because sometimes people say she's a Latino author, right? But really, I'm an author who writes stories that have Latino characters. The danger is, on the one hand, I want to reach all kids with stories, right? Everybody needs everybody's story. But I also want to reach those Latino kids who have not seen themselves in the pages. So I'm always on this slippery slope, right, of trying to decide how to talk about the book, how to market the book, and my publisher and I are always in conversation. So for example, right, they say, I write in English, and they say, so should we do marketing on Univision? A lot of people who watch Univision speak English perfectly, but we just happen to watch Univision. So should we go there? I do interviews sometimes in Spanish and English, and yet the books are only in English, so should it be a practice that all of my work comes out in 2 languages at the same time? We're going to try that next November. I have a picture book, Mango Abuela and Me, and that's going to come out in Spanish and English editions at the same time. Instead of the way they did with Yaisa, which was, it came out, Yaisa Wants a Car in English, and then a year later in Espanol. So we're all learning. And we're all learning because we're trying to sort of face this really difficult situation in publishing, and that's that there's not a lot of work about minority children, which seems shocking, right? But I say it's really important for us to take control of the story, especially in my case, Latino stories, because if we don't have authentic representations of families as they really are, what we get stuck with is this. We get stuck with stereotypes. And so one stereotype of the Latina woman is that she's muy sexy. And she likes cheetah prints, okay? And also she wears high heels, and she has good breasts, or big breasts anyway, and maybe not so intelligent. We had a version of Sofia was Charo. I don't know if you're old enough, you remember Charo in the 70s, right? She was from Spain, and she was this blonde bombshell, and she dressed like this, and she'd come on the Merv Griffin show and go, Gucci, 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 and Merv would get all blushy and things like that. It was crazy, okay? Latina as very sexy. Or if you're a boy, the Latino as a thug, right? So we have this, and my family didn't look like that, and doesn't look like that. Where's Sonia Sotomayor, right? Where are the neurosurgeons, the teachers, the engineers? Like, we come in all shades. We come from a bunch of countries. We speak all different kinds of Spanish, if we speak Spanish, because some Latinos simply don't. And so I feel like we have to take control of the story. Otherwise, our kids, not only my own kids, like my Latino kids who are being raised here, but kids outside the culture start to assume that this is it. and that's scary. So we need diverse books. So here, this comes from the University of Wisconsin that tracks data. I just wanted to show it to you so you could see. So last year, 5,000 children's books, more or less, were published. About 3,600 or so were reviewed. Only about 2% were by or about a Latino. Similar number for African American students. Really much smaller number, 1-point-something% for Native people. Less than 3% for Asian American. I mean, tiny, tiny. But look in any classroom and that's not what you see, right? You see everybody, especially in a place like Arlington, right? You just walk down the street, you can see every country around you. It's a beautiful thing. And yet our books aren't showing that. And you can see that big, the big green, that's the main character is a white character. And we were just discussing this before this presentation. That's a problem for everybody, for everybody. So this is what my family actually looked like, right? I'm the baby in that picture. That's my mother and my sister, Meg Medina. And then that's me. Do you remember those lawn chairs? Do you remember them? I can almost feel that plastic cutting into me, that sweaty thing. And my mother was always afraid I was going to slice my fingers off in that little thing that looked like your thing. And I'm holding a water pistol. I'm at my grandmother's house, Abuela Reina. And what I want you to know about this child that I was then and the person I am now is that I was bicultural. I was born here in Alexandria. My parents left Cuba in the 60s, and so they came here, and unfortunately they divorced. And my mother, that was in our apartment in Alexandria, found herself, she had been a teacher in Cuba, but she found herself here without her husband, without English, without a job, with a 5-year-old, and with an infant. So she was really mad, right? And her cousin, Nena Fernandez, who lived in New York, came to her rescue. She was the only relative she had in the United States, came to her rescue and brought her to New York, which is how I ended up living above a pizza parlor for a while. The bicultural child's a really interesting thing because there's a lot of them. And I think that's wonderful news. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. This is the first year public schools in the United States are majority made up of minority students. Still, white students are the biggest piece of the pie, but if you put all the minorities together, you get a bigger piece of the pie at last. That's great news for students. Why? Now that makes some people run for the hills, right? They get really nervous. But I say it's good because it teaches this, it gives this opportunity. And as the one skill that has come up as the #1 skill in the 21st century skill set is empathy, the ability to understand how other people think and how they decide stuff and why they decide things. It's empathy. That's what leaders need. And when you're in a classroom with a bunch of people from everywhere, you get a chance to learn empathy. And when you're reading the literature of everybody, of white kids and Asian kids and black kids and Latino kids, you're getting to be in the shoes of somebody else and you're building empathy. So I say it's wonderful. So how does all that cook into a book and not a civics lesson for you, right? When I write, I sit down and I do write a lot from personal experience, but I don't write memoir. Memoir is, for kids in the room, is a retelling of something that really happened in your life, event by event, and we hope that it's the truth. Every once in a while we get some memoir that was a big fat lie and then everybody gets crazy. But I don't write memoir, A, because I don't think that anybody would believe the characters that I'm really related to. B, because I'm worried that I will forget, I won't get it exactly right. 3, because some of the parts in my family, like everybody else's family, are a little dicey and scary. And I don't necessarily feel like I want to drag everybody out into the light with me, right? So I just lie about them, right? I just just take what really happened and I cook them into a new soup. I start mixing people, I start adding the people that should have been there, I start, changing names, ages, I give people sex changes all the time. And then I have the distance, the permission to tell the story. What has to stay true is the truth, the emotional truth of the experience. Everything else can change. But the truth of whatever difficult thing it is that kid was facing in that book, that has to really stay true. So I start with a main character and I give her an age and I do a lot of memory work. I sit down and I write to myself. I remember games that I played at that age or who my best friend was. I remember what my block looked like. I'll just do a lot of sort of pre-writing to get myself back to that person. And then I get a setting, and in the setting are the people. So if I'm setting something in my building in Queens, right? There's no building that operates without a super, and nobody likes the super, right? So you have a super. You have to have the neighbor, that cranky lady who bangs when there's too much noise, right? So you have to have neighbors. You have to have good neighbors. You have to have lousy neighbors. Maybe there's a bus driver who stops by. And I just populate the world. Like, who's here? When I'm talking about high school, I have to have the good teacher. I have to have the clueless teacher. Yes? Because they're in every school. I have to have a good friend, I have to have a foil. So I'm just, in setting is where I find who potentially is there. And then they start talking. It's crazy what happens. I spend a lot of time in my pajama pants at the computer, talking to myself to the point that my children get seriously worried, right? And I just let them speak. And I ask myself, the main character, what's her problem? So sometimes it's a problem like she's in love with the wrong person. Sometimes it's a problem like her friends betrayed her, something like that. Sometimes, as in Yaqui, it's she got in the crosshairs of a bully. A bully's threatened her. And then I start writing it. And then I start harassing my characters regularly with this question. What's really bothering you? What are you afraid of? What's so bad that you don't want to tell anybody? That you don't even want to tell yourself? And the fact is, we all have stuff like that inside of us, right? There are things that have happened to us that we're ashamed of. And that when we think of it, we go like this because we don't want to think about that. We don't want to admit that that happened. We're too afraid to say it because it will be real. Stuff like that. And then once I get my character to confess, then I know I have the story. Because the story that I write and the way that I connect with children is around telling them the truth, naming the things that are bothering them, that sometimes they don't have the words for. So I let my character give them those words. And then we just plug through the horror together. So how that works in some of my books, this is Diaisa, my aunt. You see that car, right? So you remember that I have a picture book called Diaisa Wants a Car. Well, Diaisa did want a car. She came home from the factory one day and said, Oye, I have an announcement. I'm going to get driving lessons and buy the family car. Well, the problem was that Isa was the most nervous woman ever in the planet. She had come out of Cuba by the time that things had gotten very violent. And so if an ambulance went by, she wanted to know who was dead. If somebody rang the door, she hid. If I banged the door, she was like, it was crazy. The only good thing, there were two good things. One, because of those amazing reflexes, she could play jacks really well. I'm just telling you. But the other thing that was great is that she was one of those adults, and you know how adults are. They play with kids maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then they're back to their adult stuff. Isa, if she was turning your jump rope, Isa would turn your jump rope for 2 hours. She would not leave you. If you were playing Monopoly, she'd play until you owned the last hotel. She didn't know what she was reading because she couldn't speak English, but it didn't matter. She was in. She was childlike. So one day she came home and she said, I'm going to do a driving lesson. And my grandmother said, ¿Estás loca? Are you crazy? Tú, nadie se va a meter en un carro contigo, which means nobody's going to get in a car with you. Because we were all afraid of a certain death. So she went to a bilingual driving school and she got in secret driving lessons. And one day, I'm at Abuela Bena's house and we hear outside, and here she comes in this beat up Buick Wildcat. And she goes, I did it. It was fabulous. I'm in the driver's seat, and my grandmother's deep in prayer behind me. And you see the dent in the door, in the back door, and you see the dent in the garbage can? Yes. Yes. There were many mysteriously dented things on our block after Isa got her license. And she also drove over curves, and she drove too slowly, and people gave her the finger when we were on the highway going to Jones Beach because she was going at 20 miles an hour on the highway. This was life with Isa. But you know what? She didn't care. She'd go, take it easy, when they said mean things to her, and she'd drive us wherever we wanted to go. So I forgot that story. I forgot the car, which would always stall dangerously in intersections. And when I was writing the book, when I was writing the Girl Who Could Silence the Wind, I got stuck. I was having a horrible time writing the book. And then I said, you know what? I'm done with this book. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to try a picture book because it's short and it's poetic and I've had it with this book. I was done with The Girl Who Could Silence the Wind. And I sit down and I put my fingers on the keys and I wait for a story about a girl who'd be about 7, 8, 9, and I wait and I wait and I wait. And the voice inside my head says, Tia Isa wants a car. And my first thought was, shh, Isa, get out of here. I'm working. And again the voice came, Tia Isa wants a car. And I said, really? And the voice said, yes. See, really, to take us to the beach. So I wrote this story about a girl and her aunt conspiring to buy the first family car. I wrote a story about a girl, a family that doesn't have a lot of money, who has to send some of its money back home in remittances. That happens now for Latino kids, and it happened for me when I was a kid. I wrote a story about this person who everybody said, you can't do that, who did it anyway. And she really taught me how to get behind the wheel of my own life, right? So all those years later, I hadn't thought of that story in years. And that picture book became Tia Isa Wants a Car. And it ended up winning the Ezra Jack Keats Award. And the other funny thing is that it won the Amelia Bloomer Prize, which is for feminist fiction. If I said to Isa, Isa, guess what? I wrote a feminist book about you. She'd go, ¿Qué un feminist? She would have no idea what I'm talking about. And she lives with me. She's 82 now. Because the thing about this book is that when it came out, she had a stroke. And I was really worried that she was going to die. And that she would never know that the thing I learned most from her is that everybody's story matters, right? And that you don't have to be defined by what people say that you can and cannot do. But she got better. She didn't die. She got better. And eventually, I brought her to live with me. And two things happened. She was driving a Kia Sephia with many dents that she gave to my son, Alex, so he could go to college. And then she moved in, and now she's very bossy. She'll say things like, oye, I don't like how they drew my hair, and things like that. And I go, you know, Isa, got it. But I'm very proud of this book. This, I think, is my sentimental favorite because of that lesson. Sometimes we think that writers have to have like some amazing life, and you really don't. You have to be paying attention to the simple miracles that sort of happen around you. So this was a book that was killing me when I wrote the Aisa Wants a Car. And it's a book about migration, really. It's about a girl. It's written in magical realism, I should also tell you that, which I think is important to bring because I write in English, but magical realism is a gift that came from Latin American literature. But we have many Latino kids who speak English better than they speak Spanish. We have many Latino kids who speak Spanish but are not literate, like in reading in Spanish. But I still want them to know about this amazing tradition that our people offered the literary world. So I wrote it in magical realism, but I wrote about the stories that are in the newspaper today and that make people really uncomfortable. Like if you want to make somebody uncomfortable, just go to a party and say, hey, let's talk about immigration. You'll make lots of friends. Well, it's a really charged issue, right? And I don't care about the politics. That's the first thing I say. I'm writing about the people, the young people, for whom this is an issue because most of the kids making the crossing are young kids. They're, oops, sorry, I don't have that other slide. They're young. They're 16, they're 17, they're 18, they're 19. As we saw this summer, they're 12, they're 9, they don't have parents here. And they've done this amazingly scary thing to cross a river, to cross a desert, to put themselves in the hands of total strangers with nobody waiting here. Whatever we think about that politically, you have to just wrap your head around the sacrifice and the scary decision that that is. And that's the story I wrote. And as I was thinking about it, I kept thinking, why? Why did you make that crossing? Why do they migrate? And in my mind, it has to do with hope. And the fact that we need hope when we're young. And if you don't have it where you're growing up, you will do almost anything to find it. And that's really hard for American audiences to really understand because we're kind of hopeful as a nation, right? We always think, look on the bright side, next generation's going to be better. We have a very hopeful look as a people, which is great. And we also have, especially with our young people, we think they're going to finish high school, they're going to go to college, they're going to get a good job. Like that's what we expect is going to happen for them. But that's not how childhood looks elsewhere. And so that's what that story was about. And it has 2 murders, so it's a sad story in places for young people, but I'll tell you this, Kate, my editor, said to me, do we have to kill so-and-so? I won't tell you. So violently, it was painful to read. I said, okay. And I opened my research folder, and I gave her the news accounts of people suffocating in drugs, of people being taken hostage by the very people who said they were going to cross them, and then that person leans on the family for more money, girls being violated. That's the truth of what's happening. And I write the truth for young people. Even when it's a hard truth, I try to do it with tact. I try to respect the age that they are so that I'm not overwhelming the reader, but I will not lie to children in books, even though I'm writing fiction. And then, of course, the last book is the infamously named Yaqui Delgado Wants to Kick Your Ass. So it began as a story in an anthology. And it was supposed to be Latinas at a turning point. The anthology never happened. It was going to come out of Henry Holt. But what happened is the editor moved to another house, and then the book became what's called an orphaned book, meaning the person that loved it and bought the project no longer is there and no one loves your project anymore. So I was heartbroken because the other Latinas that were going to be in there were like heavy hitters. And I was new, so I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be wonderful. And then, dashed dreams. So Kate, my editor, I think felt bad for me because I was weeping openly over this. And she said, okay, send me the story. I'm kind of curious to see what you sound like, not in magical realism, but in a contemporary voice. So I sent it. The story is based on what really happened to me in the 7th grade, which was this. I was standing in the schoolyard of junior high school 189, and a girl in a rabbit fur coat and boots came clicking over to me. And she said, Yaqui Delgado is going to kick your ass. And I said, who's Yaqui Delgado? I had no idea. But I found out. This is what I looked like, by the way, in the 7th grade. There's nothing about this girl that screams, make her a victim, right? Just an ordinary kid. That was my grandmother's house. And what happened is that I got scared. The first thing is I got scared to go pee at school, right? I wouldn't go to the bathroom because I was afraid I'd find Yaqui and her henchmen in there. Then I was afraid to go to the lunchroom because she was there and she'd stare at me and it felt like 2 laser beams on my back, right? And they'd throw milk at us and things like that, the girls at my table. Then I was afraid to go to class, and I just decided I sort of hated school. Just everything about school. The stupid teachers that couldn't see what was happening, the dean that really couldn't help me. I hated the whole school. So I stopped going. And my mother did not know. I just stopped going. And I'd intercept all of the notices that came home and carefully throw them away. I decided also along the way that I had a solution. And the solution was that if I could make myself tougher than even Yaqui, nobody would bother me. So that's what I did. I became really sort of a tough girl in the schoolyard. I smoked. I did all kinds of stuff with all kinds of sleazy people. And I want to tell you that even now, where I'm feeling better and I'm okay, I'm ashamed of the girl that I was then. When I think back, it makes my skin crawl. And I feel so sad for Meg at 13. Because I made so many terrible choices. And it took all of high school and part of college for me to feel better. Really. So when it came time to write the story about a girl at a turning point, I said, okay, but it's gonna be a doozy. So I rolled up my sleeves, and some days with a rock in my stomach, some days crying like a baby, like it was still happening, I wrote the story of what it felt like to have everything collapse around you and to become somebody that you were ashamed of. It was an awful experience writing this book, truly. But I finished it, and it was as true as I could get it. And I sent it to Kate. The good news is that as I was writing, I was thinking about important things, I think, that kids now are still thinking about. Like, what did it mean to be a Latina? Like, kids, Latinas today who read this book will write to me and say, thank God you put that in the book, because people are always accusing me of wanting to be white. This is kids who are in good classes and things like that. Like, what does it mean to be Latina? Does it mean you have to be tough? Or like, you can't be good at school? Like, how do we define that? I was wondering about how crazy, like, why do we target kids for anything? Like, they can make fun of you for being very ugly, or for being very pretty, for being very stupid, or for being off the charts smart, for having not a dime to your name, or having 2 nice clothes. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have anything to do with you, but when you're on the receiving end, right, it feels like your inner loser light is like shining bright. It's like a beacon, right? And everybody could see the way that you are a loser. But the fact is, it has to do with the bully, right? It has to do with what is making the bully uncomfortable. But when we're young, you don't know that yet, and you just internalize it. You agree in some way, you're right, I stink. I was really fascinated by the language of bullying girls because it's always the same. And we even bully adult girls with these words. Hoe, she's a slut. If she's assertive, she's a bitch, right? Those are the words that we use to bully girls and to humiliate girls. Because when you really think about it, how does a girl defend against that? What would she say? I am not. Here's the people I really had a relationship with. It's only 2. It's not 15. You know, like, there's no way to defend against that. So when I'm in schools talking to kids, I'll often say, you know, how many of you have used these words? You know, they get shy. They don't want to use these words, right? Or say that they have. But they have. You know, they'll raise their hand. How many of you have heard them? Everybody raises their hand, right? So I ask them to stop, if anything, just stop that. Girls saying that about each other, boys saying that about girls, because it's underhanded. And also, it's really none of anybody's concern, right? A girl's private life is her private life. Nobody needs to comment about that. I was really interested in how bullying bleeds out into everything. Right? It starts at school, and it goes everywhere, especially now with a cell phone and YouTube and Facebook and the Twitter, and kids get really hooked into checking what people are saying, what somebody said, who made a Facebook page. And so it's relentless. When I went to school, it was 8:30 to 3 that I was tortured, and then I was allowed to go home and breathe for a little while. But now there's no breathing because you carry your torturer with you in your pocket 24 hours a day. And that's why I think it feels like a tsunami for some kids. And that's why we see some kids making these horrible decisions to hurt themselves. The good news is, if we could call it good news, that most people who are bullied do not make those terrible decisions to harm themselves in that way. But that doesn't mean they're not hurt. They'll get to adulthood holding on to that hurt. But thankfully, the minority of people choose suicide and things like that. But it's still a huge problem in schools. And schools are wrestling with it because a lot of the bullying isn't happening on campus. So how do they stop it? Who do they talk to? How do they police it? All that's in the book. And then the most interesting thing for me is why kids don't tell. Right? Because, my gosh, go into a school, bully-free zone. No bullies here. Be a friend. Right? Except that's not always happening. And so what are the obstacles? And so as I was writing, I was thinking of all the obstacles. Obstacle A, I don't want to be a narc. Obstacle B, if I say something, I'm going to get sucked into the drama. I don't want that. Obstacle 3, if I'm, say, a gay kid and I'm being bullied about being gay, I'm going to go to a teacher and say, this is the situation, but the first question I have is, what's the teacher's attitude about that issue? Are you safe for me to talk to about that? Or do you have your own big ideas about this? So there's all kinds of roadblocks. And then let's not forget that sometimes schools operate like a little ecosystem of bullying. The teacher bullies, you know, the principal bullies the teacher bullies the kid, and the kids, you know, teachers who come in and say, sit down and shut up, or, you know, they shame you, they make fun of you in the classroom, like, that happens. That's not in their kids' imagination. That does happen. We have fantastic teachers in the schools, but we also have keep people who continue to bully. And parents bully administration as well. You know that. I'll have your job, you know, stuff like that. So it's a big, big, hairy deal. I was wondering all of that. The most questioned, this is my editor, Kate. That's who you can blame for the title of the book. This is us at the Pura Belpré Award, which was strangely held at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. If you want to freak out 10,000 librarians, dump them in Las Vegas. And they're like, it was crazy. We were all like, there are too much light. It was crazy. But anyway, that's Caesar's Palace. It was Kate who called me and she said, Meg, I have a great title for your book. I said, super, what is it? Yaqui Delgado Wants to Kick Your Ass. I said, no. And she said, why? I said, because I cannot imagine a librarian in a school assembly going, welcome, Meg Medina, author of Yaqui Delgado, although somebody announced it at this library and they did just fine. I was really worried for you librarians, and just worried. And also the biggest problem is that my mother was still alive and living with me. And I couldn't picture saying, Mommy, she was 86, and very, you know, straight. Guess what? My new book is called. And like, what was she going to say to her friends? Oh, my Lord, Meg, she has a new book, it's called. You know, like, I just thought this was going to be bad all the way around. So I said no. And she said, okay, send me a list of other titles. And I kept sending them. Yaqui Delgado's after you. Yaqui Delgado hates you. Then, you know, like I had all these lists, and she kept writing, lame, lame, no, forget it. I mean, those were our email exchanges back and forth. And so finally she sat me down and she said, so, Meg, who are you really writing for? Are you writing for PTA mothers and moms and the morality police and librarians? Who are you writing for? Or are you writing for the girl who's too afraid to go pee at school because there's a bully after her? I said, well, I'm writing for the non-peeing girl. And she said, then you need to just write the book and title it what really represents what's in the book. And so I followed her advice. And it was good and it was bad. So here, I'm going to just show you the trailer, and then we're going to talk about how this figures into the title. So that's the trailer. I made it on my iBook. It's a minute long. So I had gotten invited to a school, and they said, well, it's a bullying event. And they said I could come in March. And then in August, a few weeks before I was supposed to come, they said, well, you can come, but you cannot say the word ass. And also, please don't show the cover, and in fact, don't really talk about that. You have other books you could talk about. I said, wow, I don't think so, because here's the thing. If I distance myself from this book, it implies that I'm ashamed about something, and I'm not ashamed about what I put in this book. And also, for the kids in your school who are being bullied, if I distance myself from this, I leave them out in the cold completely, and I can't do that. Can you just send a note If the parent doesn't want their kid to see this, they don't have to. I don't force parents to do it. I get it. Some people really are uncomfortable with asses and other things. So they said, we'll think about it. And then they went out to YouTube and they saw the trailer. And they said, absolutely not. You don't represent the values of this community. And that was really painful because I'm somebody's mother. I have 3 kids who are in college now. I was a teacher for 10 years. I've spent my life in service to children. And to be told that you're in some way not good for children was really embarrassing and painful. But I felt so strongly. And I think what really set them off were the words that we used to bully girls. We have to name it. We have to be willing as adults to allow kids to talk about the situation as it really is. That's how you get to the root of the problem, not by putting posters up that say we have a bully-free zone. You have to give them a book where they can get into it quietly and ask themselves who they are in that story. And you have to let them talk about these things, if they want to, at school, with their book groups, with you. But you have to let them read. Now what happened to this silly school is that they disinvited me the week of Banned Book Week. So I didn't have to do anything. The media just went crazy. And what I refer to with all the love in my heart as librarians with pitchforks came after them. So it was crazy. It was just a massive, Twitter feeding frenzy. They were like, how dare you, all kinds of stuff. And Judy Blume came to my defense and she sent me to the National Coalition Against Censorship. These wonderful people stood up for the novel. But it's happened again. It happened last month at the Winston-Salem Book Festival. They invited me to speak at a school, but first of all, they only invited Latino students from their Latino student club to come and hear me speak, people. And also, in addition to that, they one school, again, said that they would prefer that I not discuss that book. It was crazy. 5 minutes before I was supposed to go on, they finally agreed, but nobody came to welcome me or anything like that. It was really, it was very strange. But I will say in defense of the Bookmarks Festival that the festival organizers stood completely behind me and they said, look, this is the book. She's either going to come and talk about it or she's not. That's fine. But this is ridiculous. So I did end up meeting with the students and they were lovely. They were just great. But I would have liked to have talked to the whole school because, again, I'm not only writing for Latino kids. I'm writing for all kids, especially when we're talking about bullying. So the good part is all the wonderful things that happen for this book, the awards and things like that. But mostly in my life is that getting the Pura Belpré did a few things for me, and the CNN award, which was crazy. Because listen, it's nice to say, oh yes, I'm a CNN 10 visionary. But you know what I'm a visionary for? Advocating books for strong girls and advocating for more diverse books. That's hardly revolutionary. That's just fair, right? So I was really surprised. I said, really? Really for this? And she said, yeah. And I said, okay, I'll take it, but it's sick. So I decided to use it, right? So I use it for access and platform. And what I mean is that I get to go places now and really help people understand and embrace diverse books. For example, at the Library of Congress, April 30th, you're invited. DIA, Diversity in Action. It's always April 30th. It started as El Día del Niño, the Day of the Child, and it's a celebration now that ALA supports the American Library Association about books and children, diverse books for children. I'm doing an event April 30th at the Library of Congress. I did it last year there, but this year we're going to keep expanding it. And with your help, every April 30th, it will be one day, it will be not only April 30th, it will be also the 29th and 28th and 27th and 26th, and we're going to keep building it. but it's important to celebrate this. Most people, I go, have you heard of Dia? And I get a totally blank stare. And that's fine. It's my mission to change this. I get to talk to kids about the Pura Belpré. Even Latino kids, you say, have you heard of the Pura Belpré Award? Nada. And I said, well, listen, she was a librarian. That's Pura. She was a librarian in Manhattan. And she had bilingual students, and she was the first one who said, hey, you know, we have a lot of kids here who speak 2 languages and their parents don't speak English. We need a more diverse set of books that have dual language and so on. And so the award is given annually for a work that best exemplifies a Latino experience. And so I talked to them about Pura and about getting the list. The prize has been going on for 20 years. And it still isn't a well-known award, right? So we have to change that because Latino kids deserve to know that there are lists that celebrate literature by and about them. The same is true for Las Americas Award, which was just given at the Library of Congress last month. The book that won this year is called Parrots Over Puerto Rico. And it's about the Puerto Rican parrot that almost went to extinction and the conservation effort that went into saving the parrot. But the Las Americas Award, if you go on that list, you not only get the list of books, but you can get teaching kids from them, you can get teaching ideas. They have a whole workshop where authors of the books that won come and work with teachers on how to use these books in the classroom. You know how much that workshop costs? $25. It's really inexpensive, and it doesn't have a high profile. So I've made it my mission to change that. And then the most fun mission I have is talking about all my other friends who publish Latino books. These are some of my current favorites. You know, you remember Esperanza Rising? That's my friend Joseph Eda who illustrated that. Lila Quintero Weaver. Read this dark. Her family was from Argentina, and they came and they settled in Alabama in the 60s. And her father was a photographer. And one night during a voter registration, all of the lights mysteriously went out in town, and the black residents were beaten, and her father was there photographing, and his camera was smashed. And this is a graphic memoir, so it's in pictures, like a graphic novel, except it's a real event, about what it was like to grow up in Alabama in the 60s as a Latina kid. She decided she stopped speaking Spanish and she didn't tell anybody she was Latina. Interesting story. That's Guadalupe with Under the Mesquites, which is beautiful, and John Parra and Monica Brown, who wrote Waiting for Bibio Burro. He's a librarian who has books on a donkey, and he goes up and down the mountains delivering them. Matt de la Peña, who's a real pain. I'm always presenting with Matt. I'm going to just say this. You can see he's young and good looking, right? So here's how it typically looks. Meg is sitting there. Next to her is Matt de la Peña with 50 girls leading out them going, hi, Mr. de la Peña, I loved your book. And I'm like, oh, brother, right? So that's Matt. But he's wonderful, sweet, sweet man. And a new one on the bottom that I think every girl should read. It's called Gabby, A Girl in Pieces, and it's by Isabel Quintero. She's the one on the bottom. That's a debut novel this year. Outstanding, hilarious, inappropriate, perfect YA novel. Really, really good. And I know it looks like an ugly cover because when I picked up the cover, I said, why did they do this to her? But then it makes sense when you get to the middle of the novel. It's called Gabby, A Girl in Pieces by Isabel Quintero. But it's so fun to meet these people and talk about their work and promote their work and get these books in everybody's library. And also, finally, I'm using this year to continue to advocate for girls. So I run a blog. Every summer, I'm in my 5th year, and I run it with a dear friend of mine named Gigi Amato, who's also an author from Candlewood. She lives in Richmond, Virginia. And every year, we started it because our daughters were graduating high school and we were like seriously depressed. Where did time go? We're out of time. Oh no. And then we start to think about all the books we use to raise them, like to help them through the hard moments, and also the books that we use to help us be good mothers to them. And we made a list of 18 books for strong girls, from books for pre-K all the way to books for young adult. And one of the Girls of Summer title authors is here, Wendy Shen. She wrote The Great Wall of Lucy Wu, and we chose that book a couple of years ago on one of our lists. But the cool thing about the list is that every Friday the authors come on the blog and they do a Q&A with us. And we do a big party. It's June 17th, if you want to come, at Richmond Public Library in Richmond. And I want you to picture like a rock concert for books, right? 200 screaming girls and their mothers and librarians and teachers, and there's free ice cream, and it's just fabulous. It's really, really fun. And the books are books that really talk about the process of becoming a strong girl, not just books that have a girl main character. It's something deeper than that. So this year's our 5th anniversary. I don't know what we're gonna do, but it'll be big. So like those are the things that I've used this year to do. Like in January, somebody else is gonna get the Pura Belpré medal. And I'm gonna be very happy for them because I need to rest. But this year's been fun, and it's been the beginning of like thinking of myself as a literary citizen, how we use books to make kids' lives better and schools better and ourselves better. And that's how I want to move in the world from now on. And I'm so grateful that I got this medal that helped me start to do that. So at this point, I can take any questions, or you, oh, and shamelessly, I'm going to say vote for, forget all the other books on the list, vote for Yaqui Delgado. I'm such a good politician. It's the season, you know. And this is where you can find megmedina.com, on Twitter. It's Meg_Medina. Or on Facebook, you can either be my personal friend or you could do my fan page. My fan page is very formal. I will be at the library at so-and-so. You know, if you want to see like pictures of my kids and what I have for breakfast and things, then you have to just be my friend. So questions, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them about this book. Yeah?
What are you planning to write next?
I have 2 books coming out. One is Mango, Abuela, and Me. That's a picture book that's out next November. It's about a girl who doesn't speak Espanol, a grandmother who doesn't speak English, and she moves in with the family and a parrot that they buy to help them talk. It's fun and sweet, but it's really about language and families. And that's what happens in bilingual families and bicultural families. Sometimes we lose our grandparents and our families because we can't talk to them anymore. And then the book I'm working on right now, and I have to get edits back to Kate by the end of December, it's called Burn, Baby, Burn. And it's historical fiction. It's set in New York City during the time that Son of Sam was murdering girls. And it was also the time the city was almost bankrupt. And we had a blackout that year. And in that 24-hour period, 1,000 fires were set. New York was just crazy then. So I put my narrator, 17-year-old Nora Lopez, in the middle of all that. That's a story about mental illness in a family, sort of reflected also in the mental illness of the whole city at the time. So it's dark, dark, dark. That's really something. And then the other thing I'm working on is pieces in anthologies. One for McGraw-Hill middle grade anthologies, which is fun. Middle grade is just a more hopeful sort of set of literature, so I'm working on that. Yes?
This is a little different. You seem to have a really great relationship with your editor. So for the young writers out there who are writing their own stories, how do you find that editor or that person when you're looking for someone to publish your book? I have daughters who write large books, and it seems like she's your friend.
Yeah.
And I think, but how did you find Kate? And how did that affect your writing? Because it seems like a decision she made that you went with spark something that might not have happened.
Right. You know, I'll tell you this, the publishing business is very hard because you have to find an agent first, right? That's going to take you to, the agent being the business person who presents your work to the publishing houses. The agents are the ones who have the relationship with the publishers. Certainly there are people who will submit directly to the publishing house, and every once in a while you have the story of somebody whose manuscript was taken out of the slush pile. Oh, fun. That's a Freudian slip somewhere, the slush pile, and they were saved somehow. But typically you need an agent that's going to get you to the publishing house. I think the first thing every young writer has to do is work on craft. Take every writing class you can and become a really strong writer, because sort of good is not going to do it, right? You really need to be a strong writer. And then there really is no guarantee that you're going to find a great editor. I've worked with other editors that are like, okay, you know, I was on their list, but I didn't really love them. We didn't have like heart-to-hearts. But in this case, I went to Candlewick, and Candlewick is privately owned, it's employee owned, it's completely independent, it's in Somerville, it's not in Manhattan. And it just has a vibe about it that's very personal and very loving. For example, when Thaisa Wants a Car came out, whenever a new picture book author debuts a book, Candlewick brings you to Candlewick offices. They used to, not anymore, serve milk and cookies, and the whole staff comes, and you read your book, and the staff asks you questions, from the sales staff, to the people who designed the book, to the people who edited the book, to the secretary and the receptionist. Everybody's there. It's a loving embrace, and it's a beautiful way to send your book out into the world. It's not a common practice at publishing. So I think by luck, by sheer luck, I ended up at Candlewick, and my relationship with Kate, because she's from New England, so she's a little more, you know, shy, and she has a resting, quiet face, you know, but over time, and writing hard work, and when I say writing hard work, writing emotionally charged work, where you have to say where things came from, and you have to say things like, Kate, here's what really happened, but I can't put this in the book. Like, those are the honest moments that you have with your editor. I hope I always publish with her. She's really a friend on the page. You know, I don't think we're going to go vacation together, but she and I can be courageous together on a page, and that matters to me. So thank you so much. You're so wonderful. It's so nice to have you.